And what also is scary is the unwillingness to look at the result of your actions, even if your actions were the intent was a valid intent or a kind intent. The 800-pound elephant in the room in this country is the large number of kids who enter the world without a father married to the mother. In 1965, 25% of black kids entered the world without a father married to the mother. And forget about elder. Barack Obama once said, a kid raised without a dad is 5 times more likely to commit to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in prison. Now it's 70% of black kids entering the world without a father married to the mother. It's because the welfare state has incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. 40% of all kids in America are born without a father in the house. 25% of white kids, half of all Hispanic kids, and we are doing nothing about it. We're not even talking about it. Even Republicans don't talk about it. And when you don't have a father in the house, it's not just a financial problem, which is huge. It's you don't see two adults interact civilly, resolve problems. You don't see somebody get up and go to work in the morning when he doesn't feel like going. All the values that it takes in order to be a responsible citizen, you don't have. That's why we have so much crime and such dropouts right now, and a lot of people who are functionally illiterate. 85% of 8th grade black kids in America can neither read nor write at proficiency levels. That means 85% of 8th graders, black 8th graders, are functionally illiterate. When you are functionally illiterate, you are easily misled by emotion. And it's a huge problem, and both parties, in my opinion, completely ignore that issue.
Yeah, I think it aids certain political parties because the kids end up looking to the government. They look for a strong man. Right. They look for a father.
And a boogeyman. And they look for something that made them a victim. Right. And that's why so many black people are misled into believing that America is systemically racist. It is not.
I was talking to some local school professionals, and one of the things that I was talking about with some people there was people don't know what to do with their lives. People want to work hard, but let's say this. Let's say right now you lost your job and you're like, you know what I really love doing? I really love making birdhouses. How do I start a company that makes birdhouses? I don't know step one. The funny thing is we look at video games like World of Warcraft, so popular. It's gamified, this dopamine release where you accomplish goals, but it's fake. The difference I was talking about, why is it that people will sit there playing a video game where they get the forest leather boots of agility, but they won't just go and actually level themselves up?
Right.
The thing is,
no forest boots, that's why.
No, it's because in the real world, there is no quest giver who says, if you do 10 push-ups, you will then see +1 strength. There's no leadership. And it's in line with what you're saying about fathers. Yeah. When you have someone who says, here is your quest, and they accomplish their quest, they get a dopamine hit. It feels good. In a video game, they tell you what to do. You do it. It works. You've accomplished your goal. Yeah. This is what we're missing from in real life. We're starting to lose in real life, as you were mentioning with dads.
And the irony, the information to build a birdhouse and to start a business has never been more accessible. All you have to do is go online. Right. Never has information been more easily obtained and cheaply obtained than it is right now. But you don't have somebody to give you guidance. You don't have somebody to tell you you need to defer gratification. Work hard. There's a connection between that and having a good result.
And this is why I think one of the reasons the Democrats are so hell-bent on stopping school choice. Because you keep people ignorant, what happens? They graduate from college doing the wrong things and then think, I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. If what I did didn't work, the system must not work. Yeah. Meanwhile, people with proper guidance succeed. They find that success and they say, you can make it happen. So what I want to see happen is people get good guidance and leadership so they know those first steps.
Absolutely.
But that's not what we're getting from the school system. That's not what we're getting from welfare programs.
It's what we're getting from David Goggins.
Right.
People like Goggins and Rogan and you, Tim. People like, I followed your work, Larry, but people like Larry Elder. Like
every time I struggle, every time I'm depressed, I don't go to a therapist. I'm like, type in David Goggins.
Right.
Yeah. Type in. I literally looked up Jocko breakup advice after my last breakup.
So Jordan Peterson.
Ian, as I said, I've been on radio for 30 years. And in 30 years, I have not been able to get Jesse Jackson on my radio show, Maxine Waters, Al Sharpton, Louis Farrakhan, even though I've reached out to them hundreds of times. The one so-called black leader, a term I don't particularly like, who came on my show is a guy named Kwesi Mfume. He's a congressman from Maryland. At the time, he was a president of the NAACP. He was a congressman both before and after becoming president of the NAACP. And my first question was, Mr. Mfume, as between the presence of white racism or the absence of black fathers, which poses a bigger problem to the black community? Without missing a beat, Ian, he said the absence of black fathers.
Wow.
Again, far and away the biggest problem. And Barack Obama's first book was all about the angst over not having a dad in his house, dreams from my father. Al Sharpton had a nice middle-class life until his father ran away with another woman. Into the hood he went. Louis Farrakhan's mother was estranged from her husband, had a boyfriend, took back up with Louis Farrakhan, and she tried to abort him with a coat hanger. Jesse Jackson's mother was a teenage mom who lived next door to a married man who impregnated her, and Jackson grew up in South Carolina when growing up without a dad was rare. And he was teased, Jesse ain't got no daddy, Jesse ain't got no daddy. The reason I'm mentioning this is these are arguably the four most prominent so-called black leaders, all of whom either had no relationship with their dads or a poor relationship with one, and they never talk about it. Obama every now and then says something, but by and large, they never talk about it. They talk about racism, when it's never been less significant in America.
You mentioned early in the show your dad, and that you had, a 10-year period, maybe a falling out.
Right.
But prior to that, how was it for you growing up with your dad?
Well, my father was grouchy and angry, and he spanked us a lot. My two brothers with belts, and I thought it was excessive. And I intensely disliked the man. And fortunately, when I'm a little kid, 10 years old, he starts a little cafe, and I have to work for the SOB. And he still yells at me. Now I'm 15 years old, Tim, and I said to myself, next time he yells at me, and we're talking about a diner where everybody can hear everything. Oh, it's not like it's privately in the back. He yells and screams at me, and you're looking at customers watching the whole thing. I said, I'm going to walk out next time this SOB yells at me. And it took me 3 or 4 times to work up the courage to do it, but I did when I was 15 years old. My dad came home. He paid me $10 a day plus tips. He bolted the $10 as I lay on the bed. He threw it at me, and he said, why did you leave? And for the first time, I spoke back to my dad, and I said, Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me. I'm not putting up with it anymore. Mm-hmm. He walked out of my bedroom, Tim, and for the next 10 years, we didn't speak to each other at all.
Wow.
At all. Wow. I go to college. I go to law school. I come home to visit my mom, of course. College was in New England. Law school was in the Midwest. I'd come back to L.A. to visit my mom, but I'd make sure my dad wasn't around when I was in the room.
You were 15?
I was 15 when this happened. But then I graduated from high school. My dad worked long hours, so for the next 2 years, I just made sure we weren't in the same room. Wow. Then I go to New England for college, Midwest for law school, end up working in Cleveland, and I would visit my mom all these years, of course, but I would just make sure my dad and I were not in the same room. We said nothing to each other for 10 years. Now, just real quickly, now I'm 25 years old. I passed the California bar, the Ohio bar. I should be living large. I'm 25 years old, making the equivalent of $150K. Woo. And I can't sleep. And I know it has to do with my dad. So I told my secretary, call my clients, tell them I'm going to be away for 3 days. I'm flying to LA. I'll be back. And so I didn't tell my parents I was coming because I didn't want my dad to prepare. So I get to LAX, took a cab to the cafe. Cafe closed at 2:30. I got there at 1:30. And my dad was shocked to see me. I had 2 big bags with me. And he said, shall I put your bags in the back? I said, no, Dad, I'm going to be here for 5 or 10 minutes. I want to tell you something. So he said, wait till we close. So I sat there for an hour and I said, all right, don't tee off on the SOB. Just give him the highlights, 5-10 minute conversation. He'll call you an ungrateful son. You'll call him a cruel father, and maybe you'll be able to sleep when you get back to Cleveland. So my dad sat down, and I teed off for him for a half hour. You know how I can go. We just now met, but you know how I go, Jamie.
Everybody, he can go.
So I spoke for a half hour, nonstop. Every spanking, every whipping. The time when my cousin Elaine came to Cleveland from Cleveland to visit me, and he whipped me in front of her, how humiliating that was. I told him everything, and my dad just took it. Every now and then he'd lean over and pour coffee and replenish his coffee, but he just took it. And when I was done, I was spent. I couldn't think of anything else. And my dad looked up and said, is that it? Ooh. You didn't speak to me for 10 years because of that? Now, I should tell you, I knew nothing about my father's life other than I knew he was an only child because we never got any Christmas presents. And I met his mom one time. Outside of that, I knew nothing about his life. I didn't care. I didn't like him. He said, let me tell you about my father. You know your last name, Elder? I said, yes. He said, that's not my father's last name. I said, what? What's your father's last name? He said, I have no idea. I never met him. You never met your father? Who's Elder? Elder was some guy who was in my life the longest, 4 years. My mother could neither read nor write. She had a series of boyfriends, each one more irresponsible than the one before. Elder was an alcoholic, was physically abusive to me. And when I tried to stop him from beating my mother, he would beat me. And I came home at 13 years old, he said, and I started fighting with my mom's then boyfriend. By that time, Elder was long gone. And my mother sided with the boyfriend and threw me out of the house. 13 years old, never to return. Athens, Georgia, Jim Crow South, at the beginning of the Great Depression. I said, well, Dad, what did you do? And for the next 8 hours, the man told me about his life. 2 stools as close as you and I are. And for the first time, I saw my father cry when he talked about the way Elder treated him. For 8 hours, my dad walked me through his life. I said, well, what did you do when you left the house? I went down the road. I picked up trash. I did this. I became a Pullman porter. They were the largest private employers of blacks in those days. My dad came out to California on a run. and he was able to walk through the front door of a restaurant and get served. And he was shocked. And he said, maybe I'll make a mental note to relocate to California. Pearl Harbor, my dad joins the Marines. I said, Dad, why the Marines? Anybody who's listening to us who's in the Marines knows what I'm going to say. 2 reasons. Number 1, they go where the action is. Number 2, I love the uniforms. My dad was stationed on Guam, where he became a staff sergeant in charge of cooking for the colored soldiers. Gets out, comes back to Chattanooga, where you're appearing.
Thank you.
And once I worked that in, where he met and married my mom to get him a job as a short order cook. That's what he did in the military. And they said, I'm sorry, we don't hire you. He went to restaurant after restaurant. I'm sorry, we don't hire you. Goes to an unemployment office, goes through the door. Lady says, you went through the wrong door. I said, colored only. My dad goes to that door to the very same lady who sent him out. My dad told my mom, this is BS. I'm going to L.A., where I was before the war. I'm going to get a job as a cook. I'll send for you. Comes out to L.A., walks around for a day and a half, and he said, sorry, you don't have any references. My dad said, I need references to make ham and eggs. And but they treated him the same way as they did in Chattanooga, a little more polite.
Yeah.
Goes to unemployment office, just one door this time. Lady didn't have anything. My dad said, what time do you close? She said, 9. What time do you open? She said, 9. What time do you close? 5. My dad said, I'll be sitting in that chair until you find me something. Sat there for a whole day, nothing. Came back the next day. She calls him up. I've got something. I don't know whether or not you're going to want it. My dad said, of course I'm going to want it. I'm starting a family. What is it? She says, a job cleaning toilets and Nabisco brand bread. My dad did that for 10 years, took a second full-time job cleaning toilets at another bread company. He had a hookup. Cooked for a family on the weekend to make additional money. Went to night school 3 nights a week to get his GED so he could have a stay-at-home wife. The man never slept, which is why he was so grouchy. And my dad then said, you know, and the other time I was married, you were married before Mom? I thought he was going to say 6 months, 3 months. 7 years. Wow. What happened? She cheated on me. She couldn't have any kids. And then the other time I was married, whoa, you were married twice before Mom? I was 18 years old. I married a girl 18. Her parents found out I was an 8th grade dropout, marched her down to the courthouse, annulled the marriage. So you were married 3 times? Why would you get married after that happened to you? He looked at me like I had 8 heads. He said, because Larry, I wanted you. So 8 hours, my dad gets bigger and bigger and bigger, Tim. Elder gets smaller and smaller and smaller. Now I'm crying. And I said, Dad, please forgive me for judging you so harshly. My dad said, don't worry about it. Just follow the advice I've always given you and your brothers. I get cited in my sleep. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. Larry, you cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan, groan about what somebody did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, he said, no matter how good you are, how hard you work, bad things are going to happen to you. How you address those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. From that point on, next 35 years, my dad and I were the best of friends. Wow. I wrote a book about this called Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours, about the conversation. The reason it's titled that, when I flew back to Cleveland, my dad wrote me a letter. He never wrote me a letter in his life. And it started out, Dear Son. He never called me Dear Son. He never called me son. I wrote back and I called him Father. I never called him Father. And my dad and I became the best of friends from that point on. But if anybody had a right to hate America, to believe America was systemically racist, it's my dad. Yeah. And he never believed that. My dad was a Republican. And my dad always said this about the Democratic Party, and then I'll shut up. Democrats want to give you something for nothing. When you try and get something for nothing, you almost always end up getting nothing for something.
Larry, will you be my dad?
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.